Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm here with my good friend, Sister Nadine Battle. Good to see you.
Good to see you
Yes,
too.
welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you.
Yes, let the spotlight shine on the civil rights movement.
Yes.
We don't talk about the civil rights movement. Have you ever heard a conversation about the civil rights movement in the BVI?
Not at all. I really haven't talked to anybody about it, and I haven't heard a conversation.
I don't know. For some reason, we don't like to talk about these things. We don't like to talk about our history. Whether it's pre-slavery or slavery or post-slavery, we don't like to talk about it. Somehow we are against ourselves. You know, that's
not
interesting.
good.
Huh?
That's not good.
That's not good. We're against ourselves. We're against anything African. Yeah, that's
good.
That's interesting. But of course, as I said in my opening comment, the civil rights movement to me was a big part of people of African descent around the world being able to go to the United States and get a higher education, if I want to put it that way. And I think we in the diaspora particularly, we don't appreciate our American brothers and sisters in the way that we should. And sometimes I hear people say how Africans Americans are, they're not up to par, and that's being polite, because we only see what is shown to us on the television. We don't see the hard-working, intelligent, successful African American, unless I guess a basketball player or musician. I mean, it's changed a little. More and more doctors are being portrayed on the television. More and more nurses, more and more African American police officers, and so on are being shown. So it's shifting a little bit.
Yes, and if you look, even now, if you look at some of the TV shows that have African American actors and people behind the screen, behind the camera, writers, it's coming forth more and more.
Yes, so we're making some progress in that regard.
Yes,
and all of that progress that we've made and continues to make comes out of the civil rights movement.
On the back of a lot of people who sacrificed their lives.
Yeah, give their lives. Yeah. So you were around during that time. I mean, that doesn't mean you're old, because I mean, I think I was around during that time. I just wasn't in America.
Yeah. Well, yes, and actually my family's from Alabama. My mother family and my father's. My mother's family, my grandfather was a Baptist minister. He was an entrepreneur, had property, houses, and had the first laundry for blacks in Dothan, Alabama. My father's mother owned her own farm in Newton, Alabama, and she was a farmer. And I used to go to Alabama every summer to visit both of them, and I could see the difference from New York to Alabama, and it wasn't good. Ku Klux Klan would visit my grandfather because they thought he was doing too much.
Doing too well.
Yeah, and they visit him every now and again. I mean, you had cities where black men could not wear long sleeve white shirts except for on Sunday. When you go to church, you couldn't wear them during the week. All kinds of rules that each city had. But I first got involved in civil rights when I was going on my first vacation from nursing school. I was going to St. Thomas, had my red Samsonite bag packed, and it was a hot summer in the States. There were burning cities, and there was a lot of disobedience, and there was a first aid station in Harlem. And when I called to ask if I could volunteer for a week, they said, we really need people in Mississippi. I said, really? And I thought about it, and I thought about all my grandparents and all my other ancestors went through to get to where we were, and I went. And that's where my job was, as a nurse, was to take care of the civil rights workers who were doing the voter registration, because that was a summer when they were trying to get people to register to vote, and I was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
And what year this was? This was what,
1963?
Yes, 1963.
Yes, and I had to visit the incarcerated civil rights workers as well. And because of that, Dr. King asked us to come and have a presence for the march from Selma. A young man had just been killed not too long before for civil rights, for voter registration, doing voter registration, and there was a lot of resistance in Alabama, and Dr. King felt that there was going to be violence, and so he asked us to come, and we did. I was with the Medical Committee of Human Rights from New York, and there were other chapters that came as well. I keep looking because we do have some pictures.
Yeah, well, let's bring some of the photos up on the screen. Okay.
All right, so what happened is that Governor Wallace pulled out everybody in Alabama, government worker, state worker, city worker, who wore a uniform, and he armed them. This is my uncle. He's a doctor from Detroit, and he came down from the Medical Committee of Human Rights there. He's also the founder of the largest African-American museum in the United States called the Wright Museum, that's in Detroit, and he's there with another nurse. Here's some of the marchers as we're heading towards the bridge. I was assigned, they had told us that they wouldn't let any blacks go to the hospital if they were injured. And so I was assigned to, well, you know, you have to get creative in adversity. And so the funeral parlors loaned us the hearse, and we used the hearse as ambulances, which were needed. And these are some more. Now this is one thing that changed a lot, the face, was this is an ABC reporter in the tree right there. Before, news was mostly regional. But at that time, people were getting more and more televisions, and the networks, ABC, NBC, were doing more stories, and so that's why everybody was able to view that bloody Sunday during that time. And so there's marches. This is in front of Brown's Chapel. Oh.
There you go. You look a little different, not much.
That was after a long, hard day. But yes. That Brown Chapel there, African Methodist Episcopal Church.
Yes.
It was like the headquarters. That's downstairs in the church. And it says the Medical Committee of Human Rights right there. And so that's where we did see people, because violence was expected, and we had a number of people. John Lewis, who's now, see this little boy right there? He's about 11 or so years old. He was beaten with billy clubs. And those are the dogs. They had the dogs out as well, and they did use the dogs on, and that's just a group of young people who were there the night before the first march. There were actually three marches. One on the Friday, which was stopped. Then the one on Sunday, where there was violence and the people were beaten back. And then there was the march 2 days later that was successful. And what Dr. King did, he called and he asked for everybody to come. And after they had seen what happened this Sunday, rabbis, priests, ministers of all faiths, nuns, everybody, and people in general came. And at the same time, President Johnson had sent out the army to Selma to protect the marchers. And they were successful. And the Edmund Pettus Bridge, when you approach it, you can't see, it has a rise. So you can't see where you're going. You can't see where you're going. And so they had only gotten that far to the foot of the bridge. We had sent people in ambulances early in the morning across the bridge. So in case people got across and needed medical care, it was available on the other side of the bridge. So
you had the medical team station on one side and a medical team station on the other side?
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, this was in 1965 that the march took place?
Yes.
Yes. And so this the March 7th, a couple of days ago, made it 50 years since that march.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think there was of course there was a celebration where President Obama
Big celebration.
made his big speech and all of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, you were mostly you weren't out in the mix. You were doing the medical attention. What was your experience? What was your experience like trying to?
I was out on the marching line.
Okay.
I was with the marches, but I was stationed at a particular place.
So you were seeing all the action and
yes.
all the hose,
the tear gas,
gas, and the dog bites and the billy clubs and you were right in there. How was that? What was that experience like? Were you frightened?
No. I mean, you know, you get such a resolve about something. Mm-hmm. Like when I went, there was such a resolve that, you know, it's like what happens, happens. But we had certain people targeted that we were concerned about. John Lewis was one. And you see, by having the doctors there from all over the U.S., we're able to get him out to Boston because we really thought they had killed him. He was unconscious for some time, and yet he still serves in Georgia.
Yeah. So he was what, beaten with a with a club.
Beaten. They had the dogs over him. He was beaten with the billy clubs. He got a lot of the tear gas because he was at the head. He was at the head of the line, you know.
So it was him, Dr. King, and could you recall who all was leading the march at that time?
Reverend Abernathy was there. Who was a lieutenant to Dr. King. It was also Reverend Andy Young, who later became a mayor of Atlanta.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It was Jesse Jackson, and Chicago. So it was a lot of ministers. There were people from other organizations, because one thing that happened very quickly and very successfully, there were people from different groups, and had different focuses, but they came together. We had a coordinating committee where all of the groups came under Urban League, NAACP, everybody worked together. And that's what really made the difference. You
got a figure of how many people turned out in the march? Anybody had a figure, got an opportunity to say it was hundreds, thousands?
It was, they think it was about 1,000 people. Mm-hmm. There were about 600. There were about 600 before, and then when he had the call, there were thousands of people that were there. Everybody didn't march to Montgomery, but they were there in mass to march and go across the bridge.
And this march was to demonstrate that we had a right, that African Americans had a right to register to vote. What was one man, one vote?
That's right.
This was the button.
I was going to wear it, but it's a little rusty. It's a little old. From Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. That was from.
That was Jesse Jackson's organization, wasn't it?
No, this one was more the younger people.
Okay.
Than he. Yes.
So this is a valuable button.
These are with the students. Yes.
You need Students Nonviolent
Coordinating Committee. Yes.
Coordinating Committee. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
John Lewis. Yes.
And so this was all about trying to get people to vote, and the powers that be did not want blacks to register to vote because they were afraid of that power, that political power.
Well, this was the thing. If you registered to vote, and you want any kind of assistance, state or city or state, it was cut. If you had children in school, they were put out of school. Just go back a year when I was in Mississippi, the governor there had shut down all the nursing schools that blacks could go to. Blacks couldn't go to any medical schools. So therefore the population suffered because of that. I remember, if I may just jump a second, I remember I did my bachelor's in nursing at Tuskegee. And when we did our public health nursing, there were 5 of us who were already RNs and doing the part to get our bachelor's, but we were doing public health nursing. And the first day we went to visit our clients, who were all black, we had to admit them to the hospital because of the poor care that they were being given. The notes read beautifully, but, you know, taking off the covers, turning over the patients, seeing really what was going on with them. When we got back to where we stayed, because we were all separated on our assignments, they had to all be admitted to the hospital. They got very upset, with us, but that was just the kind of care that was being given to blacks.
Okay. And of course, many people were arrested on that day as well, and put in jail, and some had to go to the hospital. There was just it was really
it was chaotic,
a traumatic experience.
It was yes, it was very traumatic. You had the dogs, you had the hoses, you had the tear gas, you had everything. And this is what
and guns pointed
and guns. But this is what people were experiencing every day all over the South. Anyhow,
so it was something that was almost natural.
Well, it was something that the rest of the world and the U.S. Didn't see, and they were able to see it because of TV. And shortly thereafter, President Johnson did sign the Civil Rights Bill
as a result of that action.
That push, yes. Push. But then we can't sit back, because now they're trying to dismantle it. In
the 21st century.
In the 21st century.
In 2015.
In 2015, they're trying, where they did things like they would redline around where blacks was and change voting districts and so forth. And then, like in Florida, traditionally, the Sunday before voting is, I think it's when older people can go after church, and it was always available. And the governor in Florida, the governor at the time, cut that out. So still, there's still. I mean, look at Ferguson, look at Trayvon. So there's still issues.
Yeah, and while you were saying that they are still trying to roll back the Voting Rights Act and make it more and more increasingly difficult for black people to vote. It flashed in my mind, Millingham or whatever his name is in England.
Yes, that's what we were speaking about
earlier.
Yes,
telling us about
new tactics.
Yeah, how we should behave and threatening our livelihood, and it just reminded me of that same pattern of behavior in the United States. It's just amazing that it just never stops. It just changes faces and changes strategy.
Yes, and it keeps going. I've been blessed to live in the 3 largest area in the diaspora of people of African ancestry, being in America, being here in the Caribbean these last 35 years, and also have lived in Brazil as well. I taught nursing in Brazil, and seeing what happened to enslaved people in Brazil, it's terrible. It's worse than here in the U.S. actually, but the struggle continues.
Well, I'm really glad that you were able to share this with us on the 50th anniversary of the Selma Montgomery March. Certainly, I think it's something that we needed to see, that we needed to hear about. We need to investigate these things, because I don't think that people in the Caribbean realize the impact that the struggle, the civil rights movement, and all the struggles.
Yes, because at the same time there was Nelson Mandela in South Africa.
Right. All the struggles of African people around the world. How it's impacted Caribbean people. We, I don't know. We seem to think that somehow we were immune from these things, and they didn't have an impact on us, and they didn't affect us. And then all of a sudden we were able to go to the United States for a better life, quote unquote, and go and get a better education, quote unquote, and somehow that just materialized. It just out of the goodness of America's heart, these things happen.
Somebody shed blood for that,
and we don't realize the blood sacrifices that were made for us in the Caribbean region, particularly. And all over the world, to be able to go to centers of learning so that we could come back and make contributions to our countries and to our people. And I think I'm very, very glad that you called me up and let me know what you had. Certainly some valuable information.
Well, thank you. I was glad to share it with you.
Yes, indeed. We're going to take a break for a word from our sponsors. And we can come back. We're going to come back with Ms. Brenda Litsum-Tai, and we're going to be talking about the National Youth Policy. Keep it locked, the Spotlight.
Spotlight is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands and CCT Global Communications.